So, part of my post-Cuba assignment was to go to Cuba and do some qualitative research on how the students were feeling about the upcoming election and what their thoughts are on what they see for the future of Cuba. And coming back from Cuba, I have done just this. The outlook that the Cubans seem to have on the new president is that they're not very concerned about it. Speaking to some of the Cubans, they aren't really involved in the politics, and during actually one of the games in the language day, one of the games was questions for both Cuban and Canadian students and kind of just about their culture. And one of the questions was for the Canadians, who is becoming president, and the Cuban partners, some of them couldn't answer who's becoming president. So that just kind of demonstrates how it's not really that much of a concern to some of them, as they're not even aware who is becoming president. And this can kind of be attributed to the fact that it is understood that the new president is just continuing what the past one had already had planned. He said he's just going to continue to follow the plan that the previous president has set out. And the new president of Cuba doesn't even have full power over the Cuban government. There are still aspects of the government that he doesn't have any control over. I believe the military, he doesn't have any control over. As for their vision of Cuba's future, it varies depending on who you talk to. Some are very excited and happy to be in Cuba, and others want to get out. Particularly Marlise, who I believe was Maddie and Olivia's Cuban, she is planning on leaving Cuba in a year or two. She wants to go to the US where there's more opportunities, and her brother lives there, so she's leaving. But other Cubans, like my Cuban junior, is happy here in Cuba, and he sees himself living here, doing music in Cuba. So it's really hard to say what all the Cubans think, as many of them have different outlooks on what they want Cuba to be. So in conclusion, the Cuban students didn't seem to have a very strong opinion on the election in Cuba. Now that may just be because they're young, and young people don't really have a lot of involvement in politics, both in Cuba and here in Canada. But they are very concerned about their own futures and the future of Cuba as a whole. Now it's different depending on who you talk to, but many are happy staying in Cuba for the rest of their lives and living and working here. I say here like we're in Cuba, but I wish. But many are happy in Cuba, living and working there, and some want to move maybe to the US and work and live there. So there is a difference depending on who you talk to, but every Cuban is very happy and a ton of fun to be with.